Okay, so we're just going to jump in here. We're going to continue on with kind of exploring what I believe with the questions from chapters 5 and 8. So the first question or the first statement asking whether or not I agree with it is the purpose of educational philosophy is to help me and other prospective teachers understand how past experts have thought about teaching. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, although I would just add that as much as you can incorporate what what other teachers have brought to the table, it's really a personal thing. It's not so much about past experts, that's part of it, but it's also what your personal teaching philosophy is. So kind of melding the two, what has been brought to the table in terms of educational philosophy, but also what is your personal philosophy. So I agree with that. I strongly agree. So the next one is going to be children should learn morals from the home. Teaching morals in school is not part of my job. That I strongly disagree with. I mean, I agree, of course, that morals should be taught in the home, but I, of course, think that if you're going to be a teacher, if you're going to be anyone who is working with young people, teaching morals is part of the job, whether you want it to be part of the job or not. They're going to be the students are going to be looking up to you as a role model. That's just going to happen naturally as a matter of course. So that I disagree with. Your job is going to be partly teaching morals to students, even if it's just leading by example. So our nation's schools should focus on teaching students to think and solve problems in the real world. Yes, I mean, I think it should be a shared focus. It's certainly important because that's the whole reason that we want an educated populace, right? Is so that we can make sure that the upcoming generations are just as equipped, if not more so, than we are to deal with real world problems, not just in their individual lives, but in terms of the nation and the globe. But that can't come at the expense of just learning the humanities, fine arts, math, science, reading, all of that. That's it. It intuitively comes together, but there's going to be things like philosophy that may not be taught at the lower grades, but you can still incorporate it in your own ways. Again, through example, like I discussed before. So as a teacher, my primary goal should be to help students master essential content rather than help them develop emotionally and socially. Obviously, that's no, I disagree with that entirely. I mean, obviously, essential content is part of the package, but again, helping the students develop emotionally and socially is part of it. In my experience, there's so many instances where the students are coming from homes where they're not supported emotionally and socially. So, where are they going to get that if not at school? So, you can kind of, I hate to put it this way, but pick up the slack that occurs in certain homes. So, no, I disagree with that. I should encourage my students to think about their personal role in making the world a better place. Well, again, I strongly agree that we need an informed populace for both the nation and the world. So, the goal of that, the whole point of getting them to a place where they can problem solve, both on an individual basis and a group basis, is getting them to that point where they have the tools necessary to make the world a better place. But it also means reinforcing them on a moral level, and just basic empathy. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things that we can, as teachers, show by example is just basic empathy, which I think I hate to get into too much of a soapbox, but I really feel like, especially with social media, that empathy is really just being eroded. I mean, I see examples all the time that kind of restore my faith in humanity, but I do feel that social media has a dulling effect. It removes a certain quality that you get when you are looking at someone in their eyes, and it kind of creates this mask where people are interacting with each other in a very non-empathetic way, and I think that that's something that should be at the forefront of education. So as a teacher, I have a legal right to determine what is taught in my classroom. No, but I also don't think it should be like, say, for example, put entirely in the parents' court either. It should be something that a community discusses, and it should be something that is come down upon in a secular way. Because you can't start bringing, religion into the mix. Otherwise, you run into conflicts in certain areas with, science and even history and things like that. So it should be something discussed on a secular level. And I mean, I'm personally of the opinion that if a certain parent or certain groups aren't willing to compromise on that, then, that's where private schools or homeschooling come in. I'm responsible for the safety of the students in my classroom. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think to kind of get into the modern discourse. I don't think that teachers should be armed or should have to be armed or should have to be trained to use firearms to make a classroom safe. I think in the short term, we're just going to have to make schools more secure from the outside. And in the long run, again, this is where empathy and just basic social fabric comes into play. Because the long game is that we sort of prevent these, emotional breakdowns, these social breakdowns, these breakdowns of community that I think cause certain individuals to kind of, snap. And anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but those are my general thoughts. As a teacher, I will be held to the same moral standards as other citizens. Well, yes, actually, as a teacher, we will be held to a higher standard because most people, unless they have an employer who is kind of Facebook stalking them, most teachers are just under the microscope constantly in terms of how they live their lives, what kind of lives they lead, what is their private life like, and how does that reflect on them as an individual. So it's not always fair, but it's just the reality right now. So let's see. The law prohibits any form of prayer in the schools. Well, again, I agree with that. I think schools should be under the whole umbrella of separation of church and state. And I will say, though, that one could maybe call me a hypocrite because I personally feel like, well, for example, we've got Halloween coming up, and I know a lot of schools are kind of, making, or they're kind of doing away with Halloween, or they're making it just like a fall festival, or at best, maybe the kids will be able to come in and dress up as like literary characters, which that I'm fine with, but I don't really think that. I don't know. I like Halloween at schools. I thought it was a lot of fun. I know that there are some issues where it's like, well, some kids are religious, or they may come from a cultural background where they feel excluded, or maybe they are from a low socioeconomic status and they can't participate. But I think there's ways around a lot of those issues. And so maybe someone would call me a hypocrite because I know that Halloween has a religious component, but I don't think that's a very strong component. I think Halloween right now is very secular, so I still stand by the whole separation of church and state when it comes to prayer in schools. And no, I don't think that prayer in schools in the past is what made things like better for society. I think that was just, people had a certain trust, and I think that social media has really impacted us a lot in a lot of ways that I don't think we can quite fathom. I know that makes me sound like a Luddite or something, like I'm anti technology. I don't mean to sound that way. I think in a lot of ways, social media is good, but, I don't know. It's a complicated issue. Corporal punishment in schools is prohibited by law. Uh, well, I agree with that. Um, so, I mean, I went to a junior high where they used corporal punishment. And I remember even then thinking it was just so bizarre. I could not wrap my head around why parents would allow, a vice principal to take a wooden paddle with holes cut in it and like paddle their kids with it. It was horrible. And I don't think that it was much of a deterrent. Those kids who were getting paddled were being sent to the office constantly. And so I don't think it really stopped them from ever getting into trouble. It was just more of a kind of a fun thing for a lot of junior high school kids to laugh about more than anything. So I definitely agree that corporal punishment should be prohibited by law. It should not be allowed. We shouldn't be treating our kids like they're pack animals. We should be finding, more pro-social ways to kind of prevent the behavior from happening in the first place. That starts with the classroom culture, and it extends to the school culture, and then ultimately to the community and the individuals in it. So those are my thoughts.